The most beautiful natural environment, from my perspective, is the one that you can get to. I think that there's not like, you ask anybody and that same question and their first reaction is to go with the closest thing to them that they've seen that's beautiful, and there's a lot of it. So I think, for me around here it would be like the Olympic National Park. And if you grow up in Croatia, there's incredible places in Croatia. I've never been to them, so I don't know how they compare, but I think if you have access to it, I think that's something that makes it beautiful.
Definitely. My most fond memory of nature was in Hawaii. I went snorkeling and I went swimming with the sea turtles. They just kind of swam up to me. And I remember seeing the coral reefs was really cool. I think that witnessing natural landmarks is really important, because I think if you see like a photograph of a waterfall and you're like, oh, that's so cool, but you don't really get the full experience until you've seen it in real life. And if you don't preserve that, you don't get the same experience of nature as you would if you saw it in person.
My relationship with environment, I think, started with biology. So magazines like National Geographic, where I got to see lots of cool stuff, and I think that as I learned more about the stuff around me, it became more and more important. And then I started learning about some of the environmental hazards and things that were species that were disappearing, and a lot of the ones that you hear about are the fault of people. There are species that are disappearing that there's nothing we can do about it. They're gone. There's the kind of damage that's happened to coral reefs in Australia. Like, that's not irreversible, but the damage is permanent, right? That they may recover to some degree, but they'll never be the same reefs. It won't be untouched.
Deterioration because of climate change, specifically for coral reefs, and the ice caps melting, and how that's affecting the animals living there, that's probably the thing that bugs me the most.
Main contributors of climate change, from what I understand of climate change, greenhouse gas accumulation is the number one thing, and right now the number one source of greenhouse gas emissions is vehicles. So cars, trucks, stuff like that.
Whenever I go hiking and I get to the top of the mountain, I see, I look across the mountain and I see all the valleys and trees, and I'm like, this is really cool. Like, I don't know how anybody could destroy this. And it's really sad to see forests go, or polar bears.
In terms of when climate change is going to be irreversible, I think that there are many aspects of it that are already irreversible, and there's, our tendency is to try and simplify things, and sometimes we simplify things too much. I think that there are major things that we could do immediately that would affect some long-term change, and that could reverse most of the problems that we see. But this winter is a good example of a change that is pretty striking. When we think of climate change or global warming, or whatever perspective you look at it from, we shouldn't have this much snow in February and March, but we did, and I think I don't think that's a natural cycle. I think that's definitely tied into climate change. So at what point does it become irreversible? There's not really a point. I think there's a lot of things that are irreversible that it increasingly becomes more and more dire. In 10 years, like if we don't do anything 10 years from now, yeah, there's going to be more stuff that's irreversible, but there will be things that we can fix. And but we could keep saying that if we wanted to.
I think that the best thing we can do to prevent the destruction of nature is fully commit to renewable energy. And I believe that no matter whether or not climate change is going to affect us or drastically right now, I think that that's something that we should be doing anyway, is converting to a renewable energy source.
If we wanted to identify one thing to do for climate change, I would say make it a point to do something every day. Just one thing every day. Whether that's, walking to your friend's house instead of driving, or being more careful about how you do your recycling, or just talking to somebody about it. Just do one thing every day, and those things add up, so they can make some big change.
If I could say one thing to climate change deniers, it would be that nature is one of the most beautiful gifts that we have, and whether or not they believe in it, they should work on preserving it. My family has been for the longest time, and even me, skeptical of climate change. Although I understand the science behind it, my parents are still very skeptical about it, but I do believe that it is really important to preserve the environment, and it is really important to, again, convert to those renewable energy sources, because it'll just be better for us as a community. And I think that if you're really in denial about climate change, do the research yourself. And again, whether or not you choose to believe it, it's still going to affect you, and it's just helpful to do the research and care about the world that you live in.